Welcome to the Connected Worlds podcast.
Greetings, one and all. I am K.M. Scott.
And I'm Alicia Austen.
And this is the Connected Worlds podcast, our second show based around the Epic of World Saga, our audio adventure that we're proud to produce. I'm going to let my good friend Alicia explain the show to you.
Thanks, Kev. On today's ep, we're going to discuss how we get through the challenges of completing a story, both in general and as it relates to Epic of World Saga. So if you want to start things off, that would be great.
Great, absolutely. One of the questions that is always on my mind when I'm having trouble writing a story, and I would like to ask other writers if I could, is what gets you through the story? What is it that you want to see by the end? When you're writing a story, it could be really difficult. I mean, you could have a great beginning and maybe even a great ending, but then you get muddled right in the middle, and it is so frustrating trying to get through. So, Alicia, would you like to field that question?
Of course, sure. So the short answer is that what gets me through a story is pure adrenaline and the need for sleep. But on a practical level, it's really just on my part, stubbornness and refusing to be beaten by what's inside my head, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I just refuse to let it go. I'm like a, little puppy that just refuses to let go of the toy, or horrible analogy, but you know what I'm saying. I refuse to stop until it's done, even if it's really, really super hard and I barely have any sleep and I hate myself and everyone around me for,
right,
however long it takes me to write it.
I like that you're fighting it. You're fighting against it.
And it is a fight sometimes, like a hardcore fight.
Right. Absolutely. You're fighting. For me, it's rough because I'm kind of the opposite in that the stuff in my head really gets me down. It's one of those things where it just weighs me down so much. One of the things, though, I think that gets me through is when I get this really cool idea or really cool notion. And what if it happened to this character? Or what if this is this really neat setting that, I could work into the story? Sometimes it's like a new toy, but sometimes a new toy can become your favorite toy. And so that I find that for me is to just, try different ideas and see what works and see what just turns me on. And by the end of it, I want to see just those ideas service the story and service the characters. I want to see something that's just firing on all cylinders. That's what gets me through. And it's not always easy at all.
Oh, is it ever easy?
No, never, ever.
Because even when it's easy, it's still hard.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like putting together a podcast from two different continents. Which has proven to be rather difficult tonight. So if you hear any technical errors, folks, it's because we're trying to get this thing together for the first time. The last time we had a podcast, we were less than a foot away from each other.
In the same room?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I'm in Asia and Liz is in Antarctica. Where are you now?
I'm in North America this week, Kevin.
Oh, good. Good. Well, it's good to know our Western Bureau is firing on all cylinders. Great to hear that. Oh,
I try my best.
Cool. Would you like to ask the next question?
Sure. So how do you see your narrative through to the end? In other words, how do you hold on to your central theme through the writing process?
For me, it's important to stick with the theme. If I don't have a theme in mind, then I find that typically when I start writing something, the thing that I write looks for a theme. There's something about the characters, or even if it's something like an action sequence, there's something about that looks for a theme in and of itself. And then when I'm looking at it all together, I think, oh, hey, wait, here it is. And then everything ties together and heads towards that theme. So for me, it's pulling towards a theme to begin with, even if I can't really suss out what that theme is right away. And I also find that sometimes that there could be more than one theme, a sub theme to the main theme that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, for me, it's pretty easy because my main theme is always pretty much the same thing. The main theme is always that life is messy and imperfect, and that things and people are rarely what they seem, and that you also have to have a sense of humor. So everything I write is basically, it basically revolves around those ideas. So it's actually pretty easy to stick with that theme because I
It's always on your mind.
am always working on those ideas, doing riffs on that kind of depressing idea or
Right.
depressing ideas that life is just,
Mhm.
it's a cluster and that people are devious. The world is, just not what it seems. So messy way to put it, but
Right. But it's that sort of, those sort of themes are always on your mind, right?
yes. And of course, that kind of makes sense that it's messy because
Right. Yeah.
life is messy, right? Including this
Exactly.
part of the podcast. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
In fact,
when you're always
Mhm.
working towards the same, working with the same kind of life philosophy, then it does kind of make sticking to the theme easier. It always manifests itself differently in each thing I write. Just so I make that clear, I'm not like literally writing about the same characters and the same, plot. It's just the same central theme is
right. The central
remains
idea. Yeah.
it remains consistent throughout everything.
The central emotional thrust.
Yes, that's a good way
Yeah.
to put it.
Absolutely. And it occurs to me that if you try to, I don't know if it's a good idea to try to put a theme in there, come to think of it. I mean, sure, you might want to write about something, but even then, that's the theme that you want to write about. But to try
Yeah,
to force
yeah.
a message, force a theme is just, or a message, a central idea, it just won't really work,
It's more about exploring those ideas and kind of that
Yeah.
philosophy I have that life is really, fucked up.
Right.
And that there's no tidy endings. I don't like really clean, clear-cut endings where everything is spelled out for people because life is not like that. It's multi-layered. There's no in life you don't get to tie things up with a bow. It's not how humanity works. So I always am
Exactly.
working around those ideas, I guess I should say. It's not necessarily theme so much. We're just using that as kind of a catch-all to express this really amorphous concept. But yeah, I'm always working towards those ideas, even if how I get there is different, even if the result is different.
You got to be honest to what you're writing, and it's got to be in you to begin
Yes,
with, right? Cool. All right. Well, let's see here. Do you know your theme? And we're defining that as the central idea you want to express, in case you're still, I don't know, in middle school. Do you know your theme right away, or do you come up with it while writing?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other, sometimes it's a mixture of the two. It just really depends on what prompted my story idea. Sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a line, sometimes it's the beginning or the end or motivation. So it really just depends. Usually it's a mixture, but I usually do find my central idea fairly early on. But, there's occasionally an exception to that where I think I'm going down path A and then path B catches my eye and then I end up on path J. So
Right.
it just totally depends on the story that I'm writing at the moment and what it and the characters are trying to express to me, which sometimes changes. Sometimes you think you know what a character would do, and it turns out that you don't know that character at all. And they insist, well, no, that's not my story. This is my story. And, you just have to kind of go with it.
Right. And it's not always a thing about I'm on a completely different theme. Nah, not necessarily. It's here's the central idea that's slightly altered from what I came up with, because as I worked with these characters, as I worked through the situation, I realized, well, maybe this shouldn't be 100% this way, but I can alter it somewhat and it still works. It works even better because that's what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
You want to tackle the next question?
Yeah. So I think this is a question that every creative person already knows the answer to, and that answer is the same for every creative person in the entire world, which is, do you ever feel it's impossible to create? And if so, what do you do when that happens?
Yes, and cry. No, hold on. It's,
Thanks for sharing your intimate feelings with us.
that's the most upbeat answer I can give.
Right?
It is crushingly difficult sometimes to create. I'm working on an episode of Epic of World Saga now that, frankly, it's interesting because I've completed another script. So that's a script and 1/13 of another script that I'm writing. And the thing is that I didn't have any idea of what these scripts would be about when I came up with them. I couldn't think of a story. I couldn't think of anything that worked. And then like that, it pops into my head, which I think is the hardest part about creating when you're in a situation like that, is that you never know when it will hit you or in what form it will hit you. So it feels like you've got nothing but an empty box, and you leave the room for a minute. You come back in and you look in the box and boom, suddenly it's filled. And it's like, wait, where did that come from? How did this almost fully fleshed out idea, or at least this workable idea happen? So, I mean, there's a lot of people who would suggest things like doing morning pages and stuff like that, but I just don't have the discipline for that. I'm not going to lie. When I'm lazy, I'm lazy. Sometimes I like to work on other ideas. Sometimes it might be good to see some movies or read some books that are similar or even different. Tragically, this is might seem a bit off topic, but Glengarry Glen Ross is a movie that I used to love watching. There's a pall over it now because of some of the recent developments of one of the cast members. I won't mention his name, but watching those characters interact and looking at how they're handling the situation, I can look at that and say, well, I'm writing a story about people who zip around space, but what if we took that story or something like that story and applied it to that situation? What would it be like if these characters were put in the seemingly impossible situation and that kind of thing? That works too. It's just as mental exercises. I think those help out a lot.
No, I agree. I think that's a great creative exercise.
How about you?
If I am not feeling particularly creative, I will do anything in the world there is to do except write, which I think is super common, and not just floating around on the internet, but, reading, having a glass of scotch, making dinner, doing laundry, going for a walk, watching a movie, and sometimes this will go on for hours or days or weeks. It just kind of depends. It's because it's really interesting. And as you know, I just finished my first script for Epic World Saga.
Ah, yes.
And I wrote it in about 2 hours, which is obviously a record for me by far. And on the other hand, there's this other project I've been working on, not an Epic World project, but just a side project that I've been playing with in my head and taking notes about for, I think, 5.5 years now. So that's kind of like opposite end scenarios there. That one thing I didn't even know I wanted to write until Kev's like, you could write a Hilda episode for Epic, if you want to do it. If not, no pressure. And at first I was like, no, I don't really feel like doing that now, maybe a little bit in the future. And then within a day, I was like, I have to do it. I know what I'm going to do. The next morning, I actually wrote it when I was still in bed on my smartphone.
On your smartphone?
Yeah, 5.5. Yes. Right. And yet there was this other project that I've been ruminating on for literally 5.5 years.
I think you told me about that one, me personally, but yeah.
Yes. I've told you many, many times over it. It's a novella someday, but I'm not quite ready to start. But yet this other thing came out of me so quickly. And I mean, on the one hand, you can't compare it because one's a novella and the other is a short. For Epic World, it's going to come in at maybe 12 minutes. So not that long, but it came to fruition so quickly, especially for something I didn't even know I wanted to write. So it's just weird how sometimes you feel like you can't, you have no ideas, or you have ideas, but they're not ready. Now is not their time. And then something else can come out of the blue and you get it done and it's good. Like, how the hell did that happen?
That is exactly what happened with those last two ideas that I had. It's just like, I have nothing here. I've got nothing. What am I going to do? And then months
just
later,
like that.
Yeah. Yep. It just out of nowhere. It's just stunning how that works sometimes, because what am I going to do here? What?
Well, thank goodness it happens because it's what keeps us going. If we didn't have moments like that, we would all give up. We would never create anything ever again. If it was always a chore 100% of the time, would any of us really do it? Probably not. But it's these like little moments of spontaneous creativity and where that kind of natural high and adrenaline of writing comes into your play. And you're like, yes, this is why I do what I do.
Yes.
Kind of balances out the other not so fun part of creation. So
right. And it's like a gift. It's like, oh man, water,
yes.
wandering in this desert. Now suddenly there's this huge water bottle right in front of me. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
And it's not a mirage. It is actually there.
It's actual purified water.
Yes.
So this next question figures into what we were talking about. You said you were writing a novella, and
yes,
of course.
Well, thinking about it,
right?
Still thinking about it, but yes.
And for those who don't know, Epic of Worlds Saga is an audio adventure along the lines of sci-fi fantasy about the gentleman genius, the uncanny emancipator, Benjamin Banneker II, who travels through the connected worlds with his friends, including Hilda Hyatt.
Woo-hoo.
And they character created by Liz, and they battle tyranny and oppression and slavery wherever they find it, or they just get into trouble on their own and they have to wiggle their way out of it. And so I created
Hilda would never get in trouble on her own. Come on, right?
Oh, I don't know. I've read your script.
That's true. That's true. You know things that the audience doesn't know, so shh.
Yeah, spoilers. So we do this as an audio drama. I originally conceived it as just YouTube videos, spoken word, similar to ASMR videos, which I don't really I like those, but I never really created them myself. And I thought I'd go with an audio drama. That actually leads to our next question. How do you determine what format your story should take? I mean, a novel, a film script, an audio drama, that sort of thing.
It's pretty easily because I write short stories. So when it comes to fiction, that's usually it. Occasionally I do a little play or something, but usually fiction-wise, it's always going to be a short story. But that's where Epic World Saga has made my life really interesting because obviously I just wrote a script for what is essentially a 21st century radio program, which is a total first for me. And it was super fun and I loved it. And I can't wait to do the next one. But yeah, so me, it's a pretty easy answer just because I write short stories. I will be hopefully starting and finishing a novella in the next couple of years, but that's still a shorter fiction. It's not like I'm setting out to write the great American novel, because I really love working with a shorter format. Just personally speaking, I think it challenges my creativity, but it also plays into my strengths as a writer, which is being able to say a lot with as few words as possible, which I love, love, love doing. And so when it comes to that, this radio script is really short, especially by Epic World standards. You know, it's not going to be a 35-minute episode.
No.
It's
right.
Maybe 12 minutes. So I kind of get the best of two worlds there, I guess. My short format, but get to write in a new genre, basically.
This is kind of out of the blue, so if you don't want to answer this is cool. But do you have any particular short story authors that you like or that you try to emulate?
I don't try to emulate anybody just because I'm further along in my writing practice. That's, not a thing I do. Everybody does it when they're young. Every single creative person does. Yeah. And you still are inspired by things and you still, do your own riff sometimes on things. But, at my age, I'm over 40, so I shouldn't be, copying other people at this point. But certainly there were some people that really turned me on to the art of the short story, like Catherine Mansfield, Anton Chekhov, people like that I discovered when I was younger. Also a lot of actual playwrights who actually inspired me when it comes to my stories. But so my writing style certainly is not like that, but just the idea that you can write in short fiction and it can be brilliant and it can be evocative and it can kind of change the literary landscape, which is what some of those people did. So I took that away more than writing styles or themes or that kind of thing.
Cool. Cool. I'm not a recreational reader, but I really like the classic kind of Edgar Rice Burroughs style of, we can make this anything we want. We can make the craziest stuff because we're putting this on another world, or we're putting this in another place. And so, just as long as it's consistent and it's fun, I mean, that's what goes into Epic of World Saga. So, I mean, like you, I don't really copy anyone, but the idea that we have the sandbox world that we can do whatever we want in. Yeah, I like that a lot. But as far as determining what kind of format something should take, I mean, for me, it kind of depends. It's funny because just off the top of my head, it kind of depends on how fast do I want this done. If I want something, if I've got an idea and it's quick and it's cool and I want the world to see it, then typically I'm going to write it as a narrative or as a radio show or something that I can easily get out to the world. But if it's something that's a little bit more involved, like a movie, or rather something a little bit more involved, very visual, I feel that, well, look, that's movie, TV stuff, and I'm going to have to get an agent, and I'm going to have to get myself out there and recognized and stuff like that. So really, it just depends on how quickly I want to get it out to the public and how much detail there is, right? Can I do it right away, or can I take my time?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. And I think the last question goes to you.
Okay, so if there's a lot of exposition, would you rather put that burden on the characters or on the narration, or maybe both?
For me, I think both is when it comes to a narrative and when it comes to epic. I want to put most of the exposition on the characters because, yes, it's a lot of talking, but at the very least, I can write it so that it's interesting. I can make it funny. I could make it kind of threatening. I think of Star Wars 1977, where there was a lot of backstory that had to be filled in about lightsabers, Darth Vader, the Jedi, and all of that stuff, which would have been terribly boring, frankly, if it hadn't been related by Sir Alec Guinness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He absolutely sold that, just made it absolutely, just really just gave it the gravitas that it needed.
Yes, I agree.
And I feel that if there's if a lot of backstory has to be filled in or something has to be explained, then it's better to have the characters describe it and even make the reader or the audience familiar with that character's way of speaking, and to try to ingratiate the character to the audience, as opposed to just have a narrator just go on for a minute or something, because a minute in a radio show is that's a big chunk of real estate. Yeah, it's better to have the characters make it interesting, right? And just try to make it sound like a conversation and not like exposition. As hard as that is, even though the audience would probably know. What are your feelings on the subject?
I mean, I usually put it on characters, just because I'm capable of imparting a lot of information in few words, and so it doesn't seem like I'm doing that. And that's definitely one of my biggest strengths as a writer. So I use it. And I just take it as a challenge to put a lot of information out there, but where a reader or listener doesn't feel like they're being burdened with an overwhelming amount of info. A lot of different layers of information that people don't necessarily know is information, but then later on they'll be like, now I get it. She was giving me information and I didn't even know it. So I like doing that.
Right. So it all ties together at the end.
Yes, it does. And sometimes it's a few different little threads, and at the end it's a bunch of aha moments, or at least I hope so, where people are like, oh, that's what she was doing. Okay.
You weave the narrative and you weave the exposition.
That is a really good way of putting it. Yes.
Cool. That is cool.
And I love doing it. I think it's a really fun thing to do.
All right. Well, folks, we have a couple of episodes coming up this month, August, and in September, and we're really hoping to see you there.
Yeah, you'll finally get to meet Hilda in September, just as an FYI.
The debut of Hilda Hyatt, and it's going to be wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really like what you wrote.
Thank you. It was so much fun to do.
Quite welcome. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, folks. Thank you for listening. Liz, you want to say anything?
Just thank you so much for spending some of your precious free time and listening to our podcast. And we've had some technical difficulties. You have no idea what went into getting this up to even be able to hit the record button on this episode. You have no idea. It was its own kind of saga. So thank you. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you
if you haven't already left.
Thank you very much. I agree 100 wholeheartedly %. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in, folks. And we will see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.